want to remind people of that story a few weeks ago in the Wall Street Journal about Biden's slips and the outrage among the liberal class. How dare they not talk to any liberals for this story? As you saw, detailed account from all of these different people who just said,
You need the liberal, right? You need the liberal take on someone's cognitive decline. There has to be balance with a liberal take on that. I mean, it's so ridiculous.
yeah, but it was coming during this wave of all of these Democratic officials saying behind the scenes, Joe Biden is sharp, he's attentive. And of course, we knew that was bullshit because we could just see him in front of us on TV, on our screens. Not clear, not sharp. But then there's also this reporting from Axios saying they're basically describing him sundowning. They're saying, well, he gets really sleepy, he gets really tired after 4 p.m. That is like it's very clear he's sundowning. So my question is, if you're operating from this assumption where you accept these facts as a reality, you see what you see, you accept it, you see he is in decline. The question is, why? Why would they continue to force him through? So, in your opinion, and again, from someone who's worked on campaigns, been in the system, why force it if they know it's a risk?
The charitable view would be that they are the people who've tried to hide this or trying to force this through to happen have made a calculated decision that they believe that while Joe Biden is a risky nominee, the unknown of another nominee, whether it's Kamala Harris or one of the so-called rising star governors or whoever else, that they're an unknown in a general election setting, so they're more of a risk. And so the charitable view is that they're thinking about wanting to beat Donald Trump, and they're worried that Joe Biden is less of a risk than an unknown. Okay, that's the charitable view. I think the less charitable, more likely reality is that the people who are trying to force this through, their financial situation, their job, essentially their employment status, their political status in the party, their social status, their cachet, all of that is wrapped up in Joe Biden. It's all invested in Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a stock that all of that in their lives are invested in. That doesn't just include people who work in the White House. I'm talking about people who run groups in Washington, D.C., who work with the administration. I'm talking about the entire political architecture of the Democratic Party, and by the way, its media organs are in some way tied into the current stock known as Joe Biden. So you can't allow that stock to be revealed for fear of the value of the stock going down or the stock being dumped. And that is sort of chaotic for you. So I guess what I'm saying is there's kind of a self preservation here among the people around Biden. And I think of it this way. I mean, there's that famous Upton Sinclair quote. And the quote is, "It's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it." Right? So it's difficult to get these Democratic power brokers to understand an honest truth about Joe Biden when their salary depends on them not understanding that truth about Joe Biden's current cognitive status. So that's the not charitable view. And then one last thing I would say is that I also think that among the Democratic political class, we are now living in a moment, in an era when the priority of the Democratic political class that has been created by that political class and sold to rank and file voters is that the highest sin in all of politics, the one thing that is simply not allowed, is to tell the truth, tell any inconvenient truths about fellow Democrats. And so I think there's part of this dynamic is that the elected officials of the Democratic Party know that there's what, I think this is the right word for it. There is an omerta. Omerta is a mafia word for the cone of silence that is enforced around essentially illicit behavior. And I think there is a deep omerta in the Democratic Party that has made every elected official in the entire party afraid to speak honest truths about even a situation as grave as this. And think about it. You saw Dean Phillips, the congressman from Minnesota. He tried to run a campaign, a primary against Joe Biden when nobody else would. He tried to actually recruit other candidates to run in that primary. Maybe he didn't run a perfect campaign, but he was the only one who actually stepped up and tried to issue a warning about this. And he was effectively thrown out of the party. I mean, he is not running for re-election. The party ran a primary against him. I mean, he violated the omerta, and he was deeply punished for it, which was designed to send a message to everyone else to be quiet. And so now here we are.
So I want to get your take on some of the media coverage about this push for Biden to drop out. We saw a wave of op-eds and columns. It's even the night of the debate. Pundits on most networks, of course, Fox, but even CNN and MSNBC were flabbergasted, saying maybe it's something the party needs to look into. Notably, Pod Save America rankled the Biden campaign by just laying it out in plain terms. This is difficult. It's a conversation the party needs to have. Ezra Klein in the New York Times today wrote, "There are plenty of voters who might want to vote for democracy but do not want to vote for Biden. That's why we see Democratic Senate candidates running well ahead of him in key states." And he makes the argument that it's just the choice was not provided to Democrats. And he says, rather than act as a check on Biden's decisions and ambitions, the party has become an enabler of them, an enforcer of them. It is giving the American people an option they do not want, and then threatening them with the end of democracy if they do not take it. Overall, this is yet another column calling for Biden to drop out. Do you think any of this is going to make an impact? Do you think this even registers with the campaign, with the party?
I think at some level it must. I look. I certainly think that we live in a country in which there is very little democracy left. I think that neither party really reacts very much to what the voting public wants. I mean, you have a situation where 70+% of people say they don't think the current president has the cognitive capacity to be president. And if that can't break through, I think, it's interesting to think about an election based on, protecting democracy, of an election about the end of democracy. I think when 72% of the country says that they don't believe the current president has the cognitive capacity to be president, and the president and his party basically completely ignores that, I think that is the part of the democracy crisis, right? The election is supposedly about the democracy crisis, but that's part of the democracy crisis. So I think what we're about to see, whether it matters or not, that question of whether it matters or not is, where really are we in the democracy crisis, right? Arguably, the democracy crisis is worse than we even think. If the Democratic Party simply cannot respond to this, will not respond to this in any serious way, it would say to me that the democracy crisis is far deeper, far graver, far more advanced than it's even being portrayed right now. That Donald Trump is not the only threat to democracy, that really both parties have become, in different ways, a threat to democracy. I'm not saying that the Democrats are worse than Trump. I'm just saying the democracy crisis presents itself in different ways. Trying to prevent any kind of democratic choice in a primary, blocking effectively is what the Biden and the DNC did, blocking any kind of real vigorous contested primary, preventing any kind of primary debate, even with the long shot candidates who ran, essentially preventing any kind of emergency intervention with a candidate who is in cognitive decline. That is, look, to put it colloquially, that's banana republic shit. right? That's like shit from the Eastern Bloc, right? Like that's the stuff that is caricatured in movies about the dear leader who's dead or half dead, and the hangers on, the apparatchiks, are still propping them up to try to cling to power, right? That's what we're living through right now. That is the democracy. It used to be a cliche because we would sort of scoff at these countries where democracy was a sham, but that's what it feels like right now, and that's what it will be exposed to be if the Democratic Party simply tries to just like tweet through this, or just ignore it, or just pretend it's not happening. That's where we are. Like, we're the cliche that America used to kind of scoff at or laugh at. That's us.